Hey everybody, David Costello here, founder and CEO of Jetpack Workflow and host of Growing Your Firm podcast. Today's guest is Amy Vetter. She is the CEO, keynote speaker, and consultant at the B3 Method Institute. We've been following Amy's work for a while. You've probably seen her content or you've seen her talk in the ecosystem. We have a lot of things to unpack in today's interview. We're going to talk about work-life harmony. Just as important as that, we're going to talk about how do you get there as a firm owner and what are some real practical and tactical ways to think about your service offering to actually achieve this really elusive thing called work-life harmony. And we'll probably dig into much more. But first, I just want to say, Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So for folks that have not come across your work at a very high level, unpack a little bit. What do you do and who do you typically work?
So I am a CPA and a yogi. So I combine the two
Of course. So
together.
common, right?
Exactly. I combine the two together in what I created as a methodology called the B3 method, which is business plus balance equals bliss, which is what creates what I call work-life harmony versus work-life balance. And we can get into that a little bit. But what I do is help professionals, accountants, and all professionals really try to find that bliss, that joy in their day, find those work life boundaries that they need. And for accountants, really help them with thinking through their CAS practices. So I had a CAS practice of my own a long time ago, and I was a partner in a CPA firm and grew a national practice as well, and eventually went and worked in tech companies, helping accountants to be able to grow these practices based on things I had done. And probably for over 15 years at this point, been consulting with accounting firms on their business process, making sure that they're thinking through their purpose and their mission of why they even have these practices and what they want out of it, and building strategies and roadmaps so that you can actually achieve the career you desire.
I love it. You mentioned something early on. You said it's harmony versus balance.
Yeah.
So how would you define work-life balance? And then how does that differ from how you look at work-life harmony?
I really changed the term of work life balance to work life harmony because I felt like work life balance is a little stressful of a term, or become a little stressful of a term, of that you have to have it and mean that it's got to be so much time. You might look at other people and say they seem like they have it. I don't have it. And really all the research around work life balance is it's not about the quantity of the time, it's the quality. And so I am a musician as well. I've always played instruments. I grew up playing violin, viola. I play bass guitar now. I'm even singing. I've started to learn how to sing. We have a concert this weekend, so I'm so excited. But when I think about music, it ebbs and flows. And really trying to take the pressure off of balance, because it could really be something you do for 2 minutes that gets you present, that resets your energy, so that you can be able to show up in your day the way that you want. So you create the energy that you want for yourself and those around you. But really taking an exploration of yourself and finding the things that release your brain. And that could be small things, that could be big things. But if today you don't have time, rather than being hard on yourself and stressed out about it, because it shouldn't add stress to your day, it's that tomorrow you do it and you start just letting this harmonize in your life versus putting pressure about it.
Yeah. And I think when you hear the word balance, at least for me, and I think probably for the majority of listeners, you think balance, you're like, okay, what's a mathematical way to represent
Yeah.
balance? And then you get in this crazy pie chart. And no matter how you slice it, it's over 100%. You know, and it's just like there's a certain percentage to work, there's a percentage to this, but it doesn't represent if you're present, it doesn't represent the quality of that time. So I do think it is a inappropriate way to think about what you want out of life because again, you hear this pie chart and it just doesn't work that way.
And that's really moving it away from an accountant mindset, right? Like, this isn't a calculation. This is a feeling. This is an emotion. This is energy. And the biggest goal around this is that you become more aware of your energy and what you're putting out in the world. And instead of blaming the outside world for how you might come home at the end of the day, what was our own responsibility of shifting our energy through the day, of recognizing when we might be showing up in a bad mood or had a bad meeting prior to another meeting, and what we can do to get ourselves present again, release things right in our workday, and not be keeping a scorecard about it. It's really about feeling it versus making sure that we achieve it. Cause I don't think there's anyone that's going to be a champion of work life balance. That it's something that you start feeling a shift in yourself. And that's how you really know.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's funny. I think if you can imagine, based on what you said, if you're running downfield with this pie chart percentage analysis, which no judgment if you are, because believe me, I have my own pie charts, I have my own numbers and analysis, whatever. But I think it's a recipe for you to be very judgmental on yourself. Like it's a
Yeah,
lose lose situation. There's no
definitely.
way you're going to be perfect on your percentages. And then you just beat yourself up. And why? What's the point? You're like, what am I
Yes,
trying to accomplish? Um,
exactly. Yeah,
well,
it's really about observation. And if you can change it from judgment to research of yourself. And that's really what this is, really researching the things that resonate with you, the things that don't resonate with you, not putting pressure on yourself. Like I said, I'm a yogi, but someone else might be like, yoga doesn't work for me. So am I less than? No. Then you find the thing that's going to give you the same feeling I get from that, right? It isn't about the thing you're doing, it's about the feeling and the energy that you get from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Help me bridge this gap a little bit. You've dropped the F bomb, which is the word feelings, podcast for firm owners. So we started from feelings. You mentioned CAS practices. So how do we go from we obviously want to drive towards work life harmony. We've talked about this intentionality of your day. So how's this bridge into and why do you have so much optimism and momentum behind CAS?
Well, it is something that I did very early in my career when it wasn't a thing. No one called it CAS. I was a CPA running what I called a fractional controllership and bookkeeping service. And honestly, many other CPAs looked down on me when I would tell them what kind of business I had. And I was like, you just send me that work and I'll send you the tax work all day long. And the reason it to me is such a passionate thing is that I grew up in a family of small business owners and entrepreneurs. And my mom owned maid services, and I would work in her office from the time I was 12, get dropped off from the bus and work in the front office and really got excited about business and what it could do. But when you think about those times, there was no technology. At that time, everything was manual bank deposit slips. Every day I'd be writing out what the work orders were for the next day for the maids. Everything was manual. And so a business owner really had to have everything in their head of what's going on. And there wasn't this opportunity we have today where we can share information. And through a series of events, my mom lost her business when I was 16 years old. And we lost our house through that. We lost everything inside of our house. And for me, I went into accounting. Like I said, I started out in music, but going through that experience, I was like, okay, accounting's a safe career. That's what I'm going to do. But always in my head, my grandfather had been a CPA, and the stories that I had been told about him was about how he was helping these other immigrants and business owners be able to achieve their dreams. And so in my head, I was like, well, I need to make sure other business owners don't go through what my family went through, what we experienced. And someone that's a business owner that's not an accountant, how do they make those hard business decisions? And so, client accounting advisory services, whatever you want to call it, I don't care what the name is. There's always these debates over the name anymore. Call it whatever you want. But what we're trying to do in that service is actually design a business that truly helps these business owners be able to understand their numbers better, be able to understand their business better, and thrive. And so, this opportunity we have where we've had these client services for forever of audit and tax, when you have this opportunity to create a client advisory services practice, the opportunity is to step back and say, how would I want my business to run? Who are the types of clients that I want to work with? Not just take any client that walks in the door. And then what kind of lifestyle do I want to have? And how do I build all the parameters around my business to have that? And so it truly is this entrepreneurial opportunity, whether you're in a big firm or a small firm, to design a work life that is not driven by these tax deadlines and audit deadlines. It is truly the pace of business and what you decide to create this business. So I think these two things relate a lot if you take the time to step back from your business and work on it and not just in it.
And how would you I love and we could probably maybe at a future part of this interview run downfield with recovering musician. I grew up as a drummer,
Oh, really?
parents' business. Yeah, my parents' business essentially went bankrupt, sold after the Great Recession, right? Maybe downfield, I'm gonna have to pick the drums back up again, or if we ever meet up at a conference, we'll have to bring it back. But it's amazing how those inflection points kind of change part of your
Yeah,
trajectory as you think about the future. But so zeroing in on CAS and so client advisory, cloud accounting, whatever it is, I think if you're debating the acronym, it's probably a way to procrastinate from just doing the work.
exactly.
But what is the typical suite of services or things you offer to a client, just to get it for the listeners really down to a practical level?
It really depends what type of business you want to design, like I said. And that's why to your point, I don't like defining it. You can be a bookkeeping service, and that is what you offer, and that is client advisory services or accounting services, whatever you want to call it. Or you can decide to have that service and controllership services and CFO services and analytics and software implementation. It can be all sorts of advisory work that dig into the numbers. It just depends on what you're most passionate about doing. The thing that I see a lot is when these practices are created, because our background is in compliance, when we think about bookkeeping in CAS, it can look like write up or look like where you're just entering the information and throwing reports at a client. And that really, I think, is the delineation of where you have to have a conversation and really dive into the numbers. And it's not just about you have 3 invoices outstanding. If you're going to have a discussion about that, you're talking about cash flow and cash forecasting and really helping them understand those numbers that they're seeing and how they can affect those numbers. And so, what I call it is becoming a cherished advisor. So, we have always been called trusted advisors in the profession, but I wrote a book called Integrative Advisory Services, all about how to create this type of practice. And in that book, I coined the term cherished advisor because when I stepped back and thought about my business and the relationships I have with my clients, it is someone that is treasured and you have to earn that, right? It's a client that cannot imagine you not being their accountant. It's not something they could easily replace because of the advice that you're giving or the insights you're giving into their information, that they know they need your brain in order to come up with better decisions for their business, or you can see things that they don't. Anyone can process work through technology anymore. An accountant can make sure things are classified properly because that's where business owners go wrong. But where we want to be valued is for our expertise, not in all the data entry. And this service line really helps you to be able to offer more relationship and conversation and really intimately get to know your clients' businesses rather than processing information and maybe they're just a name coming across your desk.
Yeah, and you've obviously implemented this mindset in firms that in the past, and now you work with firms that are doing this. And so, what are some examples? If I'm sitting here today and we're doing a lot of kind of compliance based work, or we'll call it very similar work to a lot of other firms, aside from bundling these items together, maybe thinking about packaging and pricing, what's an example of what you would be doing differently to create an advisor relationship? So, kind of conversations, or how would you start allocating your time differently to position yourself to be less compliance based and more advisor?
So, if you're in a full service firm, it is really important that you have a dedicated team that's doing this. So, a lot of the pitfalls I see is the someone from tax working on tax clients during tax season and then trying to pick this up or double do it while they're trying to cater to that relationship. And you just can't. Someone has to be dedicated to building this process, building the practice, building the relationships. And so when we look at what a client experience looks like, it's throughout the month. It's, the kind of engagement that you're going to have with them, which could be anything from doing their bookkeeping, paying their bills, are actually taking their information, doing their month end entries, running it through dashboards, looking at KPIs, looking at it from a perspective of what are the investors going to want to see, and how do we make sure you hit those benchmarks? And if you've got to have a certain amount of cash in your bank account, what kind of collections do you need to have so that you can reach that number this month? So it's proactive versus reactive. And it's making sure that you're having the conversations that are important to that client. So a lot of times I hear accountants get frustrated, like they don't even pay attention. I throw them my reports and I never hear from them. Part of it is that is a commodity, right? Getting the
Hmm.
financial statements is just something they have to do. And they know they have to do it in order to do their tax return. But someone that's going to go in as a cherished advisor and say to their client, what keeps you up at night? What are the things as a business owner that worry you? Or what are your goals that you're trying to get to this year, next year, and 3 years? And then when you're meeting with them on a monthly basis, those are the things you're talking about, not necessarily churning out the financial statement. Like we have to do that to have that conversation, but we need to build the KPIs that are important to the client so we can have those really meaningful strategic conversations that are going to be more valued by that client.
Yeah. Two things. One, I feel like probably one of the hardest aspects of moving into CAS is that you have to have conversations with clients where you don't know the answer in advance of you
Yeah.
talking to them. What are the key KPIs or what are big financing decisions? And you actually have to sit in uncertainty a little bit while you're talking with the client about these really important, often secretive things that they might be thinking or feeling. And I think it's a really uncomfortable position to be in. But having said that, it sounds like one of the key things you need to do or you need to get from the client early on is what are your KPIs? How are you thinking about your business? How are you tracking metrics in your business? And I think even getting understanding of that puts you ahead of a lot of other firms that are just being very reactive. If you know what's important to your client, whether they're in SaaS or they're in retail or they're somewhere else, there's everybody has their 6 to 12 metrics that is standard in the industry, right? Whether you're a dental practice and we had a firm on that talked about hygiene, cleaning optimization, right? So they think about that, right? But we think about net revenue retention as a SaaS company. Retail thinks about, or restaurants think about spoilage. And so it seems like it's mission critical for you to know upfront during that prospecting call or at the latest client onboarding what are the key things that you look at in your business that you're monitoring that keeps you up at night?
Yeah, I think it's really important. This is where I talk about from the beginning about designing your practice. It's that what you're trying not to do is be horizontal. You want to really understand certain industries and make sure the industries that you're being a part of or the clients you're working with, they excite you. It's something you're passionate about. So, for instance, being a yogi, like if I'm working with all fitness and health companies and small businesses, that to me is very exciting because there's more of a purpose behind it. It's not just that I'm doing the work. My personal purpose is I want those businesses to stay open so their clients can keep being able to take advantage of their services and get healthier and so forth. So there's a bigger purpose behind the work that I'm doing. And every time I talk to another studio or another nutrition person or whatever that is, I'm learning more about that industry, which makes me more valuable to every new client that comes in because I can say, oh, at this client, this is what we did. And at this client, this is what we did in order to turn that around. And I'm very clear on what those metrics are. But when I try to be everything to everyone, then my knowledge is very surface level versus how I can really dive specifically and be able to give comparisons against other people like them. And they know when they're coming to me that I work with other clients like them as well. And so they feel more comfortable coming to me as an accountant than someone that, is a generalized account.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of it sounds like momentum and value and thinking about what niche makes the most sense because you're a yogi and you have the word work life harmony on your backdrop. I'll ask you a big question which I'm not sure we can really dive into, but I'll ask it anyways. If you're an owner, let's say you've been an owner for 10, 20, 30 years, you're like, "This sounds great, but I'm just like I don't know. I don't know what lights me up. I don't know what niche. Like, are you just burned out on your business? Because everybody can find someone, right? It's disc golf or TikTok creators or board game enthusiasts. There's so many niches out there. And I'm just thinking if you cannot think of one off the top of your head or you don't intuitively have a place you can start digging, I don't know. Should you sell your firm? Are you burned out? Do you need to take a break to rejuvenate yourself?
And I think it's what creates passion around it. So I spend a lot of time talking to accountants and professionals around their personal purpose. The niche falls out on that,
Yeah.
but your personal purpose is your guiding light in your career, whatever you're doing. So going back to my personal purpose, I am trying to help people that are small business owners in order for them to stay in business and be able to have their families thrive, their employees thrive, their clients thrive, right? So, whatever niche I choose needs to align with that. If it does not align with that or my ethics or my values, then, I'm always going to feel off. I'm going to feel burned out and not
Yeah.
excited about the work that I'm doing. So, this is the thing, like, it can sound squishy to do these things, but you've got to do the work of really coming up with what your values are as a firm. Like, too many times I go into firms and it's on their website and no one can repeat it back to me without pulling up the website, or the mission statement's so vanilla that every other accountant is using the same exact mission statement. When we get into our stories, just like when I told my story and you're like, I've got a story like that, all of the people that you work with have a story. And then you start seeing what's driving everyone working there. And this is where we step back to work on the business and not just in it, where we have this opportunity to have this entrepreneurial mindset and say, Where do we want to shift to? Where would we like this to go? And how would we get more clients that would feed that? Because sometimes we're working with clients that just draw our energy down. And so if we don't do the work of coming up with our personal purpose, understanding our client personas and profiles that we want to attract and work with, of course, we're going to feel burned out and not enjoying the work because we're working with people we don't want to work with. And so we can make that shift over time. It takes time. It doesn't happen overnight, but we have to be willing to step away from the work to do that work.
Yeah, 100%. I know we're going to be butting up against time here in a little bit. I want to preview what you've seen. We believe in the power of CAS, and I know you do as well. And so, what are some examples you've seen of before and after of firms that didn't have this in place? They launched it. And then what did it look like, whether it's from top line revenue, profitability, time off? What are some, I don't know, samples of ways this has impacted people's firms?
Oh my gosh, so many examples. I'll start from one that popped into my head when you said it, that was a smaller firm, but she was working,
Sorry to interrupt, but what do you mean by smaller firm? What's the rough
uh,
parameters?
it was about 5 people on her firm
Okay.
total. And she was the owner. And she went through my course. And when she started out the course, she would schedule vacations, not take them. Her staff was actually worried about her, that she was working too much and really couldn't figure out how to turn this around, or how she was the whole reason she had started a business was so that she could have more time with her husband and family. And it wasn't working out that way. They had bought even a motorhome to go across the country and she hadn't been in it. So we actually made the goal of her business plan that she could get in that mobile home and be able to take that time. And through all the work, and I think that's the thing, it in these discussions, everyone wants an easy button. And I think part of it is that compliance services is so driven by checklists that when you're designing a practice, this isn't checklist driven. This is definitely stepping back and designing a new business. And we go over all different components of the business through automation, outsourcing, offshoring process you just need to have in place to protect yourself, the sales, the marketing, the pricing, all of that kind of stuff. Really honing in on who it is you want to serve and how you're going to serve them so you can be really clear on that. She went through a process of calling clients that didn't fit with that persona. She raised prices on the rest of them. She came up with pricing packages. Not one person complained about the change in the pricing package. And I happened to meet with her following the course, and we were on a Zoom call like this and just catching up with her. And it was 5 o'clock. And she put her face up to the Zoom camera and whispered, I could go home right now. I don't know what to do. I keep looking at the numbers. We're actually making more money we've ever made, but I don't trust it. I've never, and I'm like, this is what you do. You shut down the computer and you go home, but
This
you've
is the
got to
moment
like
we've been
break,
waiting for. Yeah.
yeah, you've got to break yourself from the habit, right? Because I think also we're so driven as accountants that we start off in this career and we're immediately given these chargeable hour goals. And if we don't hit those chargeable hour goals, we're told we're not successful, like we're not doing a good job. But in this world of technology and automation and workplace transformation that we have this opportunity to have, working over 40 hours a week does not mean you're more successful. And so that's even the part of having to break a habit, right? Like it isn't just changing the business, it's being okay that you're only working 40 hours a week and changing that mindset that's been built in your brain for year over year as an accountant that it's not okay to go home. But it is. No one's watching you. And you're okay. You are charging for your expertise. And I think that's the biggest thing to overcome, that it's not our time inventory, that a client looks at what we do and was like, I don't understand what's in your brain. I don't understand what these numbers mean. The faster you can get me an answer, the more valuable you are. But we've always evaluated if it didn't take us 40 hours, we're not, then we're going to lose money because we're going to bill them 20 instead of 40, instead of for the value of the expertise. So one of the biggest shifts is the mindset shift that has to happen through this process. And I would also say for full service firms that offer compliance services is really starting to change the mindset around how a CAS practice is evaluated. So a CAS practice provides value to the entire firm because you can take a client that maybe you were charging $2,000 a tax return for, and next year charge 24,000 because they're a monthly recurring client. And then they're coming to you for wealth management. And then they're coming to you for other merger and acquisition happen because you're so involved with their business. But the problem I see a lot of times is there's no metrics in the firm to evaluate the contribution that the CAS practice has to the rest of the firm. And so it's really important with the firms that we work with is to fully integrate CAS in, let them control the type of client that they are going to have in that practice. Don't just shove right up clients into there. That if they can control what this is so that they can create the most value and create value for the firm. And that's when it gets really successful, when it's not just everyone just kicking clients over.
Yeah, that's amazing. Really well said. And two things. I recall about once a year we'll do like a state of M&A and we bring on folks, and there was one gentleman who came on. We'll link it up in the show notes. I think it was Brandon Poe from Poe
Oh,
Advisors.
yeah.
He goes, one of the favorite things he likes to look at or ask owners before they do evaluation on the firm is how many vacation days have you taken in the past year? Higher the number, the better the value, lower the number. It's obviously very scary and contingent on the firm owner. So if you need no other reason to take vacation, is you will literally increase your enterprise value of probably the best asset or the greatest asset you have by actually taking a vacation. And the other thing was, I think sometimes, and we've talked with firms in our ecosystem where they will have this kind of fear, I think, of transitioning to other models because they've had clients hound them on the billable rate that they have sent over. And so they essentially become unconsciously attached to 1 to 3 bad clients that like said, I can't believe you spent this much time and your rates are too high. And that person's always in the back of their head. And so when they move to trying to bill on a higher fixed fee with better margins and they can actually go home on time, they're like, they have this like client or set of clients, or sometimes the imaginary client that is like, I can't believe you're not doing, like there's somebody nagging them in their imagination or controlling their life. And
I
or
would also offer up that a lot of times I see that accountants use the client in quotes, this ghost client, as an excuse to not do it. So just
Yeah.
like you said, like we focus on the exception to the rule instead of who we want. But we're also where we started the conversation of becoming a cherished advisor, not good at the conversation. So we spend all the time on technical training, but not on communication skills and not on sales skills and business development and what those conversations look like. We're actually doing a whole course this summer just on sales pricing and marketing and practicing sales conversations and getting comfortable with those difficult conversations that you might have trouble getting over. But with practice, this is what clients, I always try to flip the mindset because clients are having these sales conversations with their customers. They expect to
Yeah.
have a sales conversation with you. So we don't have to bow out of the conversation. We just have to show what our value is and then be confident in our value. So that's been the biggest thing is even if someone doesn't get past the hourly rate thing, because I like everyone to be in value pricing. Let's say your little step is to up your hourly rate. Someone will say, I was charging 150 an hour. So this year I'm going to charge 159. Instead of you could round that all the way up to 175. So we don't have to be this exact about everything.
Yeah.
We have to have the confidence in our value and what we bring to the table. And I think definitely the firms that I've worked with, that's what I see the biggest change is the confidence that they have once they know who they are, who they're trying to serve, and see that their clients respond to that all of a sudden they're very confident in what they're providing. But you have to take that time to really define that for yourself.
I love it. And we've definitely, yes, the imaginary quote unquote client that is essentially controlling the decisions you make about your firm. I
Yeah.
think is really a topic that needs to be discussed more, I think, for firm owners. This has been a real treat. And Amy, I appreciate the time today. If somebody wants to reach out, say thank you, maybe have questions, you've mentioned books and courses. What is the best way for our community to connect with you?
So I've got two websites. amyvetter.com talks about all my keynote speaking. Also, my books. I have a book called Business Balance Bliss, Integrative Advisory Services, which I talked about. I have a new book being released on April 25th, all about this mindset shift. It's called Disconnect to Connect. Tap into the power within you to create the life you desire. So definitely watch for that. And then we have a second site called businessbalancebliss.com, which lists all of our CAS courses and our mindfulness courses to really help you on both sides of this, really develop that career that you desire.
Amazing. Amy, thanks so much for spending the time. If somebody's listening, enjoyed this interview, leave a review. It helps us get the word out. And if you really loved it, you heard something that really made the light bulb transition for you, share it with a fellow firm owner that needed to hear something we talked about today. I know Amy would really appreciate it. I would as well. Share it with the community, help get the word out about some of these things we talked about. Amy, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.